All right, everybody, it's Dr. K from the Eye Institute again, and I was looking at this case and I was seeing a lot of things that I could have done better, so I thought I would do a little discussion on it. Side port, this is a fairly dense lens. Again, lidocaine mixed with epi to minimize the sting, followed by visco. So we'll get this injected, and then we use a stabilization ring. Make our 5 millimeter mark, get a good mark on there, stabilization ring, and we'll create a 2.4 millimeter incision, trying to keep it as square as possible. And so this is a fairly dense lens, and I just want to go over some of the things I see and adjustments I didn't make that I could have made at the time. So we use our 0.12 and our Utrata forceps to initiate a capsulorhexis. Now the nice thing about using Utrata is you get to see what the status of the zonules is. So they're up a little bit weak. You can see zonules a little bit weak. There's a lot of folds in the capsule. Now, there's a couple of reasons you can have folds in the capsule. One, the zonules are weak, and that's what is going on here because in that particular area, we're only dealing with the anterior capsule. And so if that anterior capsule leaflet develops some folds, then those zonules anteriorly are weak. The other thing that's sometimes a little bit misleading is the density of the lens. If it's a very dense lens, then there's not a lot of cortex to create any buffer, and every time you move the lens, then the whole capsular complex moves without any buffering. So sometimes if you have a really dense lens, you can see that the lens is kind of jiggling or moving there. It will seem like the zonules are weak, even though it's just the density of the lens transmitting forces. Okay, but the first thing was these zonules aren't very strong. And also the lens is dense, so we'll make it tougher. Third thing, what do you see here? Well, my tip is not long enough. No, I do like to reduce the tip length sometimes. I've been experimenting with that more recently. But in a dense lens like this, that is not to my advantage. And so I start, now I'm pushing on the lens. I should not be doing that as much. Don't have the tip of my phaco needle is not long enough. Now, because I notice that this is not cutting the way it should, I'm going to try and crack. And then I put my chopper out, and it's not even that great a purchase. So multiple things going on here. The chopper didn't have a good purchase. The tip of the phaco needle isn't long enough. I'm going under the capsule, just trying to get out there, easing my way out there because the zonules aren't very strong. And now create a little chop. And this one seems a little better. Let's separate those pieces and see what we get here. Trying to purchase that piece of nucleus, and there's a separation. So we only got one little crack. That's not even that great a crack, to be honest with you, but that's much better. So that's a good crack. Now let's try it again. Second instrument out, right on top of that nuclear portion. Make sure you have the collar of the lens there, and then pull them together and separate. So now I've got at least one good or two good cracks. But see how that lens sprung back into position. Let's make some adjustments. We could put more visco in here, but I didn't. But I did make the length of the phaco needle a little bit better. Okay, so that's one thing. A big improvement right here. Now we'll separate those pieces. Okay, now there's another crack there, and I don't actually know how I got that one in there. I didn't think I spun the lens enough to get a crack over there, but it must have propagated. But still a very big piece of lens. Let's get that up. And now we can try and chop this. And we're about midway in the anterior chamber here. And notice I'm going to phaco from kind of underneath because I want to pull the lens down. I do not want to phaco this dense lens up by the endothelium. So again, phaco tip kind of underneath the lens, chopper behind. It's not as important right now because you still got 3/4 of the lens in the bag. So that bag most likely isn't going to come up. Let's refill with viscoelastic. That's always wise. And now work on getting the rest of this lens material out of here. You'll notice there's no overhead display on this one for whatever reason. It wasn't hooked up. So go out, make sure you have the edge of the lens, and chop. And now we can kind of do this all, carousel it all around and do this. The reason I like to do it that way is because you're not taking out any viscoelastic along the way. You only start taking out the viscoelastic when you actually go get a piece. So let's chop these up. There you go. Okay, so now we've got some manageable pieces here. We will angle them up a little bit into the anterior chamber, not too far, maybe iris level, and get each piece out. And this will work. Try and nudge that one back in there. Try not to fish up for pieces by the endothelium. I don't think that's good to do with the phaco handpiece, but I'm not going to say it never happens. Get this piece out. It does help to wiggle the phaco tip sometimes. A little bit of extra motion allows that piece to get into the port there of the phaco handpiece. We'll chop these last couple pieces. But the things to learn there are make sure your needle length is an appropriate size. In softer lenses, I try and make it shorter, but in dense lenses, it needs to be longer. Some folks have a real aggressive phaco needle length. That's not me. Second thing, you really be aware of the status of the zonules. I could have put visco out under the edge of the capsule to try and create a buffer with some viscoelastic. Right now we'll get our epinucleus out of there. I did not do that, but as I was watching this video, I thought it might have been a good thing to do. So in the future, I could do some viscodissection, as they like to say. Now you notice that last piece of epinucleus is right up against the endothelium, or at least stuck in the visco. So I'll leave that. I will go and get that with the IA handpiece. There's no need for me to put my phaco needle up anteriorly like that. Try and suck out some epinucleus, which is easily going to be removed with this IA. We'll get it out right now. 2 seconds. Perfect. So make sure the length is right. Make sure you have, you can put some visco out under the edge of the capsule to create a buffer to not stress the zonules. It looks like I didn't stress the zonules too much. I could have increased my phaco power, gone into dense settings. Now you'll notice that most of the cortex is out. The actual zonular capsular status looks pretty good. It's not moving around. That posterior capsule isn't trampolining up like it's untethered posteriorly. So at this point, I'm kind of debating whether I want to put in a capsular tension ring, and I basically decide against it because I feel like now that the lens is out and I'm irrigating into the anterior chamber, the capsule does not look too unstable. Now, sometimes I'll use the age of the patient even to determine whether I put in a capsular tension ring, and I guess you can discuss whether that's appropriate, but this is a much, much older patient. I thought the lens would remain stable in the bag given the current status of the bag and the age of the patient, and so I opted to not put in a capsular tension ring and just put in a single piece lens. In a younger patient, if I felt like the status of the bag was not stable, I might reconsider and put in a capsular tension ring in a younger patient. So we will get our second instrument. I use the second instrument to open the incision and then also to stabilize the eye. Use the Sinskey to expand the haptics and get that lens completely in the bag. I know a lot of folks will do that with the IA rather, but it's just habit and I like it. Make sure you go behind the lens to get out any residual viscoelastic. Don't be afraid to do that, but do be gentle. I usually will keep it in cortex removal mode to get the viscoelastic out behind the lens, and then switch to viscoelastic removal mode once I've moved anteriorly, just because the ramp is much higher on viscoelastic removal mode, and I don't want to accidentally grab the bag. Then we'll hydrate our incisions. And it's a good size capsulorhexis. That's another thing. The capsulorhexis was a good size. You don't want it too small in these denser lenses. It's nice and round. It's very well centered. We're going to inject our moxifloxacin and check our incisions, which are going to be pretty well sealed here at the end. And this will turn out to be a good case, and the patient will have an excellent result with a clear cornea the next day, which was today that I saw her. So this went pretty well, but those are things to be aware of. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful to you. You folks have a great day. Bye now.